I'm going to assume that since you made it here, you've got some interest in this subject. Let me know if you can hear me in the back of the room.
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Okay, good. So let me give you a little outline here. I'm going to talk about what they are, a little bit about the shamanic history, a little bit about the law, a little bit about, I'll talk a little bit about the chemistry, preparation, and experience, and I'll finish up with a little bit of Nietzsche, which kind of relates to the whole psychedelic project. So, and if you have a question, I don't plan to talk for more than about 35, 40 minutes. So if you have a burning question and you think you're going to forget it, just stop me. But basically, I'll probably answer most questions by the time we get going. So anyway, the talk is called Morning Glory, the Orphan Psychedelic. And what we're talking about are the seeds of primarily 3 New World flowering vines. And one is called Rivea coriambosa, and that's apparently in Mexico and places south. There's another one called Argyria nervosa. That's the Hawaiian baby wood rose. And the one that I'm familiar with is Ipomaea violacea, which is the common morning glory vine that grows all over the United States. So let's talk about, that's what it is. These plants are the seeds of the common morning glory. History. They were well known in antiquity, and that is in Mexico, and this is previous to the 16th century. Nobody knows how far back the shamanic tradition goes, but it starts to show up in Spanish records during the conquest of Mexico. And not a lot is known about the rituals involved in the shamanic use of these plants. But what we do know is that they had statues of a nature god, and there was like 4 plants on the statue. One would be the mapacho tobacco. Peyote would be carved onto the statue. Teonanacatl, the mushroom, would be carved onto the statue, and the morning glory, a morning glory type plant would be carved onto the statue. So it's well established that it was important, but very little is known about the ritual. Now, the ritual use was systematically suppressed during the Spanish conquest by the cheerful Christians. What that really means is that the Inquisition murdered anybody that had anything to do with it. In the 1620s, an officer of the Inquisition named Ruiz de Alarcón was sent to investigate. Now, in Jim DeCorn's book, Psychedelic Shamanism, I'm going to read a little excerpt that he describes the situation. The Indians, Alarcón complains, seemed always to find new ways to thwart even the best efforts of the clergy, including himself as the investigating emissary of the Holy Office, hiding their supplies of ololiqui. Ololiqui was a native name for the seeds, in secret places, not only because they were afraid of discovery and punishment by the Inquisition, but for fear that ololiqui itself might punish them for having suffered it to be desecrated by the touch of alien hands. Always, he reports, the Indians seemed to be more concerned with the goodwill of ololiqui than the displeasure and penalties of the clergy. And this is, Alarcón quote says, he says, "This is not the same fear for which they have for the ministers of justice for the punishment they deserve. Rather, it is the fear that they have for this same ololiqui, or the deity they believe resides in it. And in this respect, they have their reverence so confused that it is necessary to have the help of God to remove it, as well as swords, the rack, and burning people at the stake." And the modern result of this is that we don't know much about the ritual itself, what they really did with it. We know it was important, but we don't know what they did. Apparently, the practice survived the Spanish Inquisition by retreating into the most remote parts of Mexico. Now, I haven't made a thorough study of the what's been written about the the ritual. There may be things out there that people know more about, but on a casual research project, I couldn't find much about the details. And as far as I'm concerned, that's fine, because I'm not trying to be an ancient Aztec. And so the seeds offer a kind of interesting avenue because not much is known about it, and it doesn't have that history available to burden it. And so I'm going to introduce one of my theories, is that what's needed in the West is homegrown shamanism. The Amazonian shamanism was a homegrown indigenous event that grew to meet needs of the people in the Amazon at that time, using the materials at hand. What's needed in this Western rational place is a homegrown something like a shamanism to grow indigenously, meeting the needs, using the materials of this time. So I'm not going to try and be a Peruvian or be an Amazonian or go study all their deities and what they think was important, because I don't think that's really how it works. And so anyway, that's the history of it as far as the shamanic history. And then let's talk about the law here. The main ingredient in the seeds, in the woodrose seeds, in all these vines, is a substance called LSA, which is lysergic acid amide. And I don't know if you can see in the back, but there's the LSA molecule. And on the right there is the LSD molecule. One is lysergic acid amide, and one is lysergic acid diethylamide. And what the difference, really, main difference between the two is that there's two ethyl groups stuck on one of the rings. And you can think of LSA as a low-octane version of LSD, although it behaves differently. But the two molecules are almost the same. Now, the government says that's a Schedule 3. LSA is a Schedule 3 substance with whatever legal BS goes along with that, and they list it as a depressant. The seeds are completely legal to purchase by the pound. And you can plant them in your garage or in your garden. You can take a bath in them. You can stick them in your ears, but you're not supposed to eat them. And if you tried to market something that was an extract of morning glory, you'd probably get some static from somebody. But as far as making yourself a mug of seed mush and having a trip, well, I don't think anybody cares. And that leads me to the question, why are they still legal? Which I have a theory about that. I think they've been hiding in plain sight for about 5 reasons, and I'll go through the reasons. One reason is the seeds got a reputation in the 60s as what high school kids took when they couldn't find any good stuff. That's one reason. The second reason is they're practically free. How can they be worth it? The third reason is they aren't terribly visual. And if you listen to a lot of Terence McKenna, he says, what I want is extravagant hallucinations. And the seeds are not, they don't excite the visual cortex very much. They are visionary, though. You can go inward and have visions, but it's not with the eyeballs. And so when people are wanting a fun trip or a trippy trip, the seeds might seem a little dull. And that's another reason. And that ties in with the fact that men have always established the psychedelic paradigm, what's worthwhile. And I think that men want a more visually engrossing experience. And so the seeds don't quite make it on that scale. Not that you can't see stuff go on, but it's not its strong suit. And the other reason is, and this is pure conjecture on my part, LSD, for example, it really goes and works with your central nervous system, the brain, the cranium. The seeds, I think, really work with your enteric nervous system. And I don't know how many of you know about the enteric nervous system, which is a complex of many, many millions of neurons in the stomach and the gut and all the related organs. The seeds grab you here, and they move you from the body. LSD moves you from the head. The seeds grab you from the body, give you a yank. And if you can't process that energy, your stomach gives up and says, blah, you barf. And it's the barfing reputation that has put off a lot of people from wanting to work with these. And that's fed back into the high school kids who take this stuff thinking they're going to have fun, and they end up throwing up in the middle of class or something. And that's how all this got started. But the approach is really worthwhile in that it really does activate a lot of feelings, emotion, and stuff that I say that the seeds grab you by the body and your head catches up during the day. And if you can keep up with it, you don't have to throw up. I would say I puke about 60% of the time. Well, I mean, not 60% of the day, but I mean, I have whole trips where I don't throw up. And I've done them over 100 times, so that's not a conjecture. I mean, you know, and I don't mind it, because a good psychedelic puke is wonderful. Seriously. And I don't find that I don't find that I feel sick for hours and hours. Usually about the 7th hour into the experience or something, I'll go, uh-oh, stomach's going to go upside down. I'll grab the bucket, and it's all done in 2-3 minutes. And then I'm back to doing other stuff. So it isn't like being drunk and you're sick for 2 hours and your head's spinning and you just want to die for the whole time. It's not like that at all. So I think because of all those reasons, the authorities have figured, well, just leave these laying around because kids will try it and not like it, and then they'll be turned off to psychedelics. Maybe, I don't know. So in any case, I feel like they've always hidden in plain sight. I know for myself, many, many times I'll sit up in the middle of a journey and go, this shit's legal? Oh, fuck. And so that's the law. Don't try to sell a product with seeds in them. And let's see. Let's talk a little bit about preparation. I got turned on to these mainly through Jim DeCorn's book, Psychedelic Shamanism, and because in the late '80s I started doing therapeutic work with LSD, and by about the end of the '90s I ran out. And I couldn't find anything, and I was getting desperate. Like, what am I going to do? So I got Jim DeCorn's book, and I'm reading about all this stuff, and came across the seeds and kept reading and reading, and it's like, shit, you can buy these. They're easy to prepare. They're a cousin of LSD. I said, okay, I'll try it. So, I went down to the hardware store and bought 10 packets of seeds and gave it a shot and said, yeah, this isn't bad, And so let me talk about, the other reason why this is the other reason why people haven't really twigged to this. A rumor, and I don't know if it ever was more than a rumor, went around in the 60s that seed manufacturers were tainting the seeds with either an emetic or a poison. And that kind of floats around in people's minds too. I purchased seeds from the Harris Seed Company of New York. They have a quote on their website, raw and untreated seeds. Okay. So apparently they're aware of who might be buying their seeds. And
This little market.
Yeah. And a quarter pound is like $15 delivered.
Wow.
A pound is $45 plus change for delivery.
And how many doses is that?
Depends. I'll talk about dosages. Yeah. And so, yeah, I call it the myth of the tainted seeds. And so preparation is really easy. I weigh out the seeds in the evening, grind them up in a little coffee grinder, put the powder into a mug, put in lukewarm water, and let it sit overnight. And in the morning, kind of break it up. It gets kind of gummy. So stir it up, put a little orange juice in there, and choke it on down. It doesn't have a bad taste, but the texture is disgusting. After you've done it a lot of times, I get this shoulder shake just walking up to it. It's like, you know, it'll do that. And a lot of people go through complicated extractions. They're trying to, oh, well, this is kind of funny, because I sent some to a friend of mine, and he did them with a friend of his, and they puked all afternoon. And he calls me on the phone and says, "God damn it, you fucking poisoned me." And I said, "Oh, you must have met the spirit in the seeds. What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, the Aztecs, they had a secret name for the entity that lives in the seeds and delivers wisdom." "What are you talking about?" I said, "You met El Barfo." And so a lot of people, in order to not meet El Barfo, they do extractions and try to, you know, complicate the thing. But from what I could gather about the ancient use is you just grind them up and you eat the whole thing, the husk and everything. And so it's a very simple preparation. I mean, you order the seeds online, and you grind some up and let them sit overnight and soak, and then you chow them on down. So that's the preparation that I do. Some people make a tea, and they got off. So you can make a tea and strain out the solids. Let's get down to, well, I guess I should talk about dosages. I would say 5 or 6 grams is a handshake dose. And that's like 3-4 hours, 5 hours of experience. And if you hate it, you're not committed for 10 hours. If you really like it, you can always do more. And you could start with less. I mean, but I would say 5 grams. And if you don't have a scale, there's about 30 seeds to a gram. So you could count out 150 seeds. And they're small. They're about the size of a peppercorn, something like that. And like I say, that would be probably about 4 hours of really active experience. They're kind of slow to come on. I generally do 20 grams when I do a dose of them. It takes about 3 hours to really get on the hump, and then it's a 10-hour ride. I don't do more because it just lasts too long. After 8 or 10 hours, I've had enough. I'm worn out. I've done all the screaming and puking I can do. And so anyway, details of where to buy them and dosage, you can ask me again later if you forget. But that's the basics of it, and it's easy as cake to do. I think it's another reason why people like to, some people want to talk about these, but when you say, you can just buy these tomorrow, they're like, oh, I got to go brush the cat, or, you know, something is more important. And anyway, that's the preparation of it. Let's see here, where are we going? Another piece of paper. Experience, or why bother? And so I'm going to get some water here.
Have you tried screening out the pulp, and does that make any difference for you?
I've never done it. I just grind them up and eat them. And so, no. A friend did, and she felt like it was better for her stomach.
Can you repeat the question?
Have I ever screened out the pulp, made a tea, basically, a liquid tea? And
kind of add to that, I've strained it out. It works. It doesn't work as well if you just, the seeds, having the actual matter of the seeds really helps a lot.
there you go. And there's more, see, here's the thing. There's more than one alkaloid in there. And I believe in because it's a plant, I believe in using the whole plant. And that's what the Aztecs did. Of course, see where it got their civilization. But anyway, They were busy chopping each other's heads off. So let's see. I consider them a world-class psychedelic. And let me relate them to LSD. Like I said, LSD grabs you really by the head and gives you a mighty yank. And the seeds grab you here and give you a yank. And so they really operate at a different level, but they're both highly integrative. And what I mean is, the seeds are real good at identifying an emotional complex that you've got that you haven't been dealing with. And they'll tease it out, and you'll get a look at it. Stuff that you've been putting up with or perhaps was undifferentiated. I do a lot of trauma work, so as far as I'm concerned, most people in this culture have got unconsciously held stuff at some level. And the seeds can tease that stuff out in a very similar fashion that LSD does it. They do it from a little different avenue, but the result is very much the same. And you can have full kit ego death experiences with the seeds. I mean, I've left the ego and had spiritual visions with them. I've had dead people visit me. One place I've gone to several times is a place where time and space become like transparent layers going in every direction. And it's all happening right now. Past, future, time's flowing this way, time's flowing that way. I don't even have any idea which way time is flowing because there really isn't any. And in that place, you have awareness, but it's almost not even local. And the seeds have taken me there many times. And James Joyce has shown up several times to just a strong presence of Joyce. Joyce was multidimensional, I really think so. I mean, if you've read Finnegan's Wake, you got to scratch your head, but I think there's something to it, that his resonance was much more than one earthly life. And the seeds have taken me there. I've seen the room light up and presence of golden entities, saints, I don't know what to call them. And that was with eyes open. The room got really bright and I just saw all these entities around me. Childhood suppressions, trauma stuff, yeah, you can address it with this. You're nodding.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally can. It's actually the chemical that made me realize that I was trans. And it was a pretty dramatic moment, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really does pull from the body. If you've got issues with the body, it really pulls them.
And I think that's, I think one of the fundamental building blocks of the West is to be divorced from your body, because that's how the authorities can then use you. They hollow you out and they can use your carcass. And you live in your little head perched on top. So the seeds are really kind of the opposite of that. And I think that's a critical thing about the seeds, is that they work from here, hence people get sick a lot, they're not used to it. And if you can't work with that energy that's being developed in your body, yeah, the stomach, something has to give, and your stomach goes upside down. And I'm not saying there isn't stuff in them that inherently makes your stomach get a little upset. A typical journey for me, at about an hour to an hour and a half, my stomach feels a little bit queasy and I don't want to move too quickly. I just kind of park myself, and a couple of times I may feel like, oh, I'm feeling a little ill. But it passes, and I generally don't throw up early in the trip. If I'm going to throw up, it's usually 6 or 7 hours into the shindig, and it happens quickly. So that's that story. Let's see.
Can you take tramadol?
I have never done that. It certainly is a possibility. I mean, unless there's some contraindication with LSD type substances, yeah. Yeah. Let's see. The seeds grab you by the gut, and the head catches up later. Let's see, what was I going to say about the experience? Well, one thing is, I didn't approach the seeds as a novice. I had done many, many pretty bone-crushing LSD experiences, and so I've learned to roll with it and let the drug take you, let the substance grab you and take you. I can do that. It's an acquired skill. And so when I got to the seeds, I was able to let them do their thing with me. And so I don't know what it would be like to be a novice or someone who hasn't done much in the way of psychedelics and then run into the seeds. I have introduced a few people, and this is a whole other subject here I'm going to introduce. Women seem to do better with them than men. And I'm not sure why, but I gave them to my sister and some other friends, and they had really good experiences on like 5 grams. And this one person in particular thought that they went places that even LSD didn't take them, because it's different. LSD is a rather straightforward piece of business. It's just kind of like a powerful car, and you put a brick on the accelerator till the thing runs out of gas. And this is an important difference. The seeds have an ebb and a flow to the experience, and they offer you to look at stuff, and they lead you to look at things, and if you resist, they don't force you into the memory or whatever, but then what they'll do is say, the resistance, well, let's look at the resistance, and you spend some time with that. So they're not as forceful as LSD. And for trauma work, LSD is like just a pneumatic jackhammer. I mean, it's just going to batter down through whatever you got. The seeds aren't as forceful, but they're in a way they're more subtle, and shamanically speaking, they're a lot quirkier. LSD is rather flat-footed compared to the seeds in terms of quirkiness. And by quirkiness, I mean visitations from the dead and feeling like time has kind of stopped and maybe it's running 2 ways at once or 10 ways at once. And there's more odd stuff that comes up with the seeds. Not that LSD can't get weird, but the seeds have a level of quirkiness that I really appreciate. If I wasn't doing so much trauma work, it would be, I would really like to investigate them even farther. I'm doing a lot of trauma work, and so sometimes it's like, we just got to get through this, and LSD is probably one of the most direct paths through that. So that's the experiential part. Dim, 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 and they're not very visual. Yeah, I think there really is something here for women. And I think a handshake dose isn't likely to scare you out of your socks. And so I think they're approachable that way. And they're a mouse click away. So let's see. And like I say, men have always established the paradigms of psychedelic experience. Most of the books have been written by men. Terence McKenna lectured endlessly, and DMT, that's the center of the bullseye, and anything else is, kind of a why bother? And I was like, well, who made him the arbiter of this? But according to his standards, extravagant hallucination and all that. Well, okay, that's what he felt. He's welcome to it. So let's see. That's ebb and flow, and we're quirky. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the psychedelic project here. I'm going to read a little passage from Nietzsche, just a paragraph. And yeah, Friedrich Nietzsche, German, somewhat philosopher, died in 1900. And he was keenly aware of the modern predicament. And I'm going to read this, and I'll talk a little bit about it, and then we can just have a good time here. And this is one of his most famous passages. You'll probably be familiar with it. He says, God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, comfort ourselves? What was holiest and most powerful of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacred game shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we not ourselves become gods to simply seem worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever will be born after us, for the sake of this deed, he will be part of a higher history than all history hitherto. Here the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern on the ground, and it broke and went out. I come too early, he said then. My time has not come yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of man. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds require time even after they are done, before they can be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves. And that's and what Nietzsche was really talking about is the breakdown of the Western narrative. That is, if you were in 14th century France, you were a Catholic, and everybody was a Catholic, and the world was ordered along Christian lines. You couldn't have even discussed the reality of that. It was just the way it is. And Nietzsche saw that these narratives were breaking down in the era of Darwin, Freud, Einstein, the things that were happening. Of course, he died before Einstein, but he felt that he felt the changing of the time, and he understood it. He didn't really know what to do about it, but he understood it. And he says, what new rituals, what festivals of atonement? How do we... And his fear was nihilism. He felt that without an organizing narrative, that there would be... we would end up in a nihilistic place, that nothing would have any meaning. He feared that situation. And so I looked at that, and I kept thinking about what he was saying there, and I thought, you know, the psychedelic project is our own groping towards something besides an authority-based narrative. And people are only too quick to offer you a new narrative. You know, religious groups, or Richard Dawkins wants to offer you, you know, the atheist narrative, and aren't you happy with just being a speck in an unimportant planet on an unimportant solar system in an unimportant galaxy? It's like, no, that's not very satisfying. And so there's a lot of narratives out there, but the Western tradition has always been authority-based narratives, and narratives that are really just another thing in the head. And so Nietzsche, I think, was totally correct about the void, the breakdown of the narrative. And I think what we're looking for, and I'm presuming to say what you're looking for, I don't know what you're looking for, but I feel it. I feel the breakdown of the narrative. Look at the politics, look at the insanity going on in the world. And I think we're looking for, you know, a direct connection, which is an old but a new idea here. I know that's come to me. I've gotten plugged in any number of times to a pretty big matrix out there. And so there's another subject of discussion. And I think that this has to happen in the West. It has to happen in the West because the people who are burning the world down are here, not in the Amazon. And so I think the answer needs to be homegrown here. And I think that's part of what we're doing. So I've gotten a lot of value out of the little seeds. I do them from time to time still. And oh yeah, that's one more thing about it. They're exquisitely sensitive, or they make you exquisitely sensitive I've learned that if you throw in just a teeny tiny bit of MDMA with the seed experience, like in the middle, and I'm talking like a milligram or two, like grain of salt sized piece of MDMA, it just lights things up. It remains a seed trip, but it lights it up in a very nice way, and just it's a lovely adjunct to that experience. But whatever you do with these, anything you add into them, it really, I mean, you're so sensitive, it's unbelievable. And lion's mane. I've been doing lion's mane mushroom with everything I do. I've done it with the seeds, I've done it with MDMA, and I've done it with, what else did I do? No, that's been pretty much it. And lion's mane is great stuff. You can feel it in your nervous system, kind of helping the nervous system reclaim itself from the Western thrashing that it's gotten.
How much lion's mane?
Well, they tell you to take 2 capsules a day or something. They're 500 milligram. It's just stuff that's commercially available. So during a trip, I'll take maybe 4 of those.
Depends on the potency. If it's like full spectrum extract, you know, like 2 caps, like a gram and a half.
Yeah.
If it's like a more standardized extract, it might be lower doses. That's a gram and a half to 3 grams.
Yeah.
You can also grow it rather easily from mycelium. Like if you can find a grow bag and get it to fruit, then you take it, once it stops fruiting, you take the mycelium and mix it back in, and you can make your grain-based stuff. And I know people who just use the myceliated grain, not even put it up into the wood chips or whatever, the fruits, and you can dry those out and grind them, and you just have like rice, you know, with the mushroom, and you take some
That's about right.
of that.
Oh, let's do that.
So I think I'm about done jabbering, and so there's a lot to talk about, I hope. Yeah.
You mentioned there's it's more of a body gut level connection.
Yeah.
So I find that's true with mushrooms. Have you done, what's the difference between the two then?
Well, I'm not too simpatico with mushrooms. I've done them a few times,
Okay.
and they kicked my ass so badly the last time I did them.
Yeah.
They said, "You're just too white. Get the hell out of here." And that was many years ago. So they're less visual than a mushroom. And I think, just from my experience, the seeds really will start to tease out feelings and stuff that you're holding on to. I mean, they're pretty psychological in their own way.
So
And-
one other question, are they?
Yeah.
I've heard from somebody that they were precursor connected to MDMA. Do you know anything about that?
The seeds?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
No. Yeah.
You just mentioned that between 5 is a handshake and 20, you use 20. What's the most you've heard of or that you've taken?
Well, DeCorn talked about some people taking like 40 grams, like a couple of ounces, and I couldn't imagine it.
Why? Because it would just last too long?
I think it would just last too long. I mean, I go pretty far on a dose, and I'm pretty open to it. I can't see it, you know.
So it's both, the increase will be both the depth and the duration?
Probably. Yeah.
You get more sick with different doses, or is it the same kind of action?
I imagine there's some linearity there in relationship, but I kind of went to 20 and said, yeah, that's working. And so I felt around, and I did some bang-up trips with 10 grams, but over the years I kind of just kept pushing it. But it seemed, I think I did 22 grams one time and said, you know.
You
Yeah.
mentioned that your first experience was with a seed packet that you got at the hardware store.
Yep. Lily Miller.
I've read in so many places warnings about buying them commercially unless it says that they're untreated.
Yep.
Because they can have toxic fungicides and
Yep.
bacteriicides.
Yep.
So organic would be the same thing then, untreated?
Well, all I know is I've done the seeds from Harris in New York like 80 times, They say they're raw and untreated, and they work, and I don't seem to suffer any ill effects.
Organic does not mean untreated, by the way.
Yeah.
And so they say raw and untreated, and they make a point of putting it in big letters. So I take them at their word on that. And they always have them. The variety I buy are called Heavenly Blues. Now, it's interesting that the Morning Glory strains that are out there, one of them is called Pearly Gates and the other one's called Flying Saucers. So maybe someone knows something. You know. But I haven't found Pearly Gates or Flying Saucers in a long time. Yeah.
What would a bad trip on the seas be like? Have you had one of those? Where they like?
Yeah. Well, I don't believe in bad trips, but I will describe an experience.
Okay.
Because I'm doing trauma work, when a new level of traumatic memory starts to shake loose, it comes up in a chaotic fashion of bits and pieces. And I had an unfoldment of a level open up on me. And I'm laying on the floor, and my eyes closed. I had all these jagged, swirling blue and red jagged swirls going on, and bits and pieces of distorted sounds, words, and gobbledygook. And this went on for quite a while, and it was disorienting, and it was, there was nowhere to hang my hat as far as anything that made any sense, inside or out. Now, I've been in those spots before. At the time that one happened, I had to laugh because I said, if somebody had this shit come up and they weren't expecting crap like this, they'd call 911. But I've spent a lot of time reading Stan Groff's work, and I know that when you've got trauma shit coming up, it blindsides you. It comes up in a way that you can't imagine, like, well, what the hell is this? What's gone wrong here? And after that shit swirls around long enough, pieces of it start to hook up, and it starts to make some sense where you are and what you're experiencing. But when it first erupts, it can be very disorienting and very, very unpalatable. So yeah, you could have intensely difficult experiences with this. That's what I can say. It's a powerful substance, no doubt about it. It can kick your ass.
So for novices, or do you have any safety
5 grams.
tips? Or
Well, yeah, I would start out.
heart problems, don't take them, or what kind of?
I don't think there's any particular contraindications physiologically that I've ever heard of. For example, MDMA, of course, is a stimulant, and
It's a vasoconstrictor, so it tends to get a little rough on the heart. So
The seeds?
niacin with it helps.
The seeds?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
At least I found it really tenses me up, and I've heard that it is. So like I
Okay.
take like niacin with it, and it's really, really helped. Or chug a Red Bull. That works
Magnesium.
really well.
What? What's the last part?
Chug a Red Bull.
A Red Bull.
It's like Red Bull is just an instant shake up to get rid of
Red Bull
Yeah.
has taurine.
Yeah. all that.
Taurine is calming through the system as well, and
All
that's
that
why I
Okay.
have it in there is to reduce the shakes from the stimulants in it. Like,
Yeah.
but
Let me
magnesium as well,
further address what.
which helps with like the vines with MDMA, that can help with that kind of stuff too. If you get like too much vasoconstriction, magnesium. Topical is actually much quicker to absorb through the gut. It is not very efficient. You can get magnesium sprays where it's just like kind of a briny solution. You just spray it on your shoulders, probably.
Epsom salt as well.
Epsom salt, yeah, foot soap or something. But it's a good quick way to do it.
I mean, the trick to a safe experience is a safe space where nobody's going to demand anything of you. I mean, I unplugged the phones. I put a sign on the front door saying, "Bad migraine, please do not disturb."
That's a good.
And no one's going to demand anything of me. I own my own home, so nobody's going to walk in. And I can, and I built a soundproof cupboard upstairs. And I go in there and scream for at least part of any journey, because I'm doing trauma stuff, and trauma is traumatic when you're integrating it. And so I have the space to let it all hang out. And long ago, I learned to manage myself on these experiences. If you have someone there who you trust, that's good. But I don't think there's any special considerations here that are different than LSD, mushrooms. If you go deep and it gets ugly, it gets ugly. And that's a function of you going somewhere that's difficult. The seeds have no plan for you. They don't have a content built into them. So this is my general theory on psychedelics, is there's no such thing as a bad trip. There's difficult trips. There's trips that have stuff in it that you don't want to deal with perhaps, or that is just really painful. I went through tremendous physical and emotional abuse as an infant, and I'm remembering that stuff, and it's horrible. But, and every trip there's some part of it that's really, really hard. You don't want to be there. And, but that's why I go in there. So, you put on your miner's cap and take your baseball bat with a spike in it and you go to work. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Yeah.
Yeah, when you say it's not very visual, is it like just introspective sort of stuff, brain space, or do you have like closed eye kind of?
Early in the trip, I'll see a little bit of that hypnagogic stuff with the eyes closed. The little bit of patterns, but it's not very strong. I don't do much visuals anymore. Like I can be really ripped on acid, and the room looks about the same. A little bit energetic, and my eyes are a little out of focus. Other than that, the room looks pretty square still. But when I go inward, I really go inward. And Stan Grof talks about this. He says the aesthetic level, which is seeing the walls shift and patterns and the carpet dancing and all that kind of stuff, that tends to go away as you go further inward. That's like a level you pass through. And after a while, I just don't stop there very much. So, but the seeds are less visually stimulating than most other psychedelics. And
do they have like the like with DMT with me, like has shit I see has nothing to do with what's in the room. But,
yeah. You're never disconnected. I've never been disconnected from my basic surroundings with the seeds. They're not deliriant at all. You are pretty much aware of where you are. But if you're doing a meditation and you close your eyes, you can certainly have inward visions.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't ever find that I'm distorted, like don't know where I am, or eyes open, can't figure out what's going on. It's never like that. Never. Yeah.
I'm curious what you've learned about working with trauma over the years. 'Cause I would personally like to know.
Well, I had the good fortune to read Stanislav Grof, his first book, before I really started.
LSD psychotherapy?
Realms of the Human Unconscious. And because I had started working with MDMA and I had a birth experience. I slid down this tunnel of images from my life, rapid images, and then I found myself just having been born in a bassinet, just like, I'm here. And then I got that book and started reading it, and I said, shit, this is what this is all about. And so, having read that, it primed me to allow me to go into this stuff, which is extremely painful. I mean, you don't want to go into this crap. It's not any fun. And so, but I knew that I had tons of experience that was locked up and causing me pain, and this was the way to get at it. And so, I would say if you're going to try and do this work, you got to read some Grof. He's the only one. I mean, the MAPS people are great, and the MDMA stuff is great, but that's like the low-hanging fruit. And for some people, they can get good results with a couple of MDMA sessions. That's great. But for a lot of people, that's just going to open the doors maybe a little bit. and there's a lot deeper work to do. And that was the case for me. I did about 20 MDMA experiences and said, you know, this just isn't getting me down into it deep enough. Because I got to the point where I only get about 20 minutes of work out of an MDMA trip, and I would burn up all the energy. I'd pop out of it and go like, you know, that's just not getting it. Because you need time to stew in your juices when you're working on trauma stuff. You gotta just kind of lay in it and tease out, or allow the pieces to start making themselves known to you. You don't have to do anything. Put yourself in a position where the stuff can surface, and it will, as you can deal with it. And in my experience, the seeds are good at that. They're good at integrating the pieces that you break loose. And that's what the seeds really are good for, organizing. LSD is good at breaking stuff loose. Not that the seeds won't break things loose, but LSD is really good at breaking things loose. And the seeds do some of that, and they're also good at helping you organize things once it's broken loose. So, I mean, I could go on and on about trauma stuff, but yeah, Kat.
Can you tell us, like, your process? Like, one thing you said is you go into a room and scream. What other types of processes are you using when you're doing this traumatic work?
Yeah. One thing, well, lion's mane has become a staple. I mean, I add lion's mane into whatever I'm doing when I trip. And there's times when I do cross-body movements. I'll get on the floor and I do these movements like this, and trying to get the two halves of the brain to start interacting and using the body to get that to happen. And it's become a tool. There'll be a time in a trip I'll go, oh, time for some body movement. There's kind of like a Greek chorus that helps me to figure this stuff out as I go along. It's become a running joke. I'll try to think of some more examples. But anyway, yeah, I do the cross-body movements. And the only reason I have the cupboard is if people heard what I was going through, they'd call the police. Because it sounds like someone is being murdered. I'm not serious about this. In this culture, you cannot let this energy go legally.
Right.
You can't do it.
That's right. Yeah.
You cannot. And the idea that you could let this go in a therapist's office is a complete, utter fucking joke. It's a total joke. It takes hours. It takes hours to get to some of this stuff. I mean, you really work and stew with it. And after 5 hours with LSD, then it's like, oh shit, it starts to come loose. And, you know, it's a handful.
What do you do for fun?
I'll tell you, this stuff isn't any fun for me. This is like, you know, when I started Journey, it's like root canal number 206. I know what it's going to be like.
If you weren't doing traumatic work, or, you know, work on trauma, then, you know, is it possible you could drink chuck it down and have a good time?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm not saying there aren't sublime moments in journeys. I mean, I have seen, you know, God or whatever passes for God. I brush with the infinite every time I go out there. But that's not really why I'm there. The spiritual stuff takes care of itself. I'm there to reclaim my nervous system from the damage of the culture, of my parents, of that stuff. I mean...
So you deliberately go there, or is it because you're feeling it, you get taken there?
Oh, I don't direct it at all. If I relax and do nothing, I go into this stuff. There's no... I don't have to direct it at all. It's if you've got locked up energy, it wants to come out one way or another. And the physical side of it, the pain will lead you to where the work is. And that's the way it is. Yeah.
So can you tell me about the construction of your screen cupboard?
Yeah, upstairs there's an interior closet. It was a walk-in closet. And I doubled up a lot of it with extra layer sheetrock and insulation. And now I got a futon in there. And it's the most interior space. And it's pretty much, I can let go whatever I got to let go in there.
You have like that special sound and
No, not really. But I did put up extra sheetrock and insulation between, so it's an extra layer. And that's been essential to have that, because I don't want to have to think about the neighbor banging on, are you okay, or the cops showing up. There's something going on here. It's like,
I was really and I've heard it before. I was really struck about your comment about how it's not legal, or we don't have permission to do stuff like that in our culture.
No, you don't.
And I've heard people from other cultures say it is okay in their culture. It's recognized as, valuable to have the ability to go crazy sometimes. And we're not allowed to go crazy.
We're dying of decorum.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Huh.
Yeah.
Even in our psychedelic journeys and ayahuasca circle, you really can't just like cut loose. And
That's why I haven't wanted to do ayahuasca with a group, because I would be a buzzkill. And I would fully intend on it. I'm there to do my work, and that's the way it is. Yeah, Larry.
A couple of things. Having gone through a long series of ayahuasca in Peru, if you're deeply traumatized, it can take a long, hard path. I went through 7 sessions of ayahuasca before I had a major, what I consider a breakthrough. And the first 7 were pretty bad.
Yeah.
It got into some good stuff, but every one of them started out bad.
Yeah.
And those were all guided sessions. Those were all guided by a shaman and others facilitated. I personally have tried morning glory and in a non-guided setting, and I think it was 6 grams, 5 or 6 grams, something. Is it grams or milligrams?
Grams.
Yeah. And I was nauseous within 45 minutes and vomiting within an hour. And and nauseated most of the time. It was not a pleasant session, and having not been guided, I got stuck at one point, and I had no idea what to do with it. And it took me a long time to get out of it. And if you're a novice in that respect, in that you haven't done your own things without guidance, this can get nasty.
Uh-huh.
So start out at a small dose.
I'm a coward. Yeah, I feel these things out gradually. Why not?
What would be the smallest dose you could start with and get something?
A gram or 2?
Okay.
Yeah. I can chew a dozen seeds, for example, and I've done this many, many times. I'll just chew up 12 seeds, and there's something that it does. It has an effect, and a gram or 2, absolutely. I tend to say 5 grams is a good starting point for a trip that will have some meat on it. But by all means, start small, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And then you...
have you heard of anything that helps with the nausea part of it? Anything at all? Any bad?
Yeah, I think some people have talked about some anti-nausea medications.
Dramamine.
Yeah.
Just get it over.
Ondansetron is the good one if you can get it. Ginger helps a lot if you don't want to go pharmaceutical.
Yes, I've heard about people doing ginger.
Just chew on some ginger root and or ginger soda. I like ginger soda a lot.
if your body's trying to expel it though, shouldn't you let it? And the other thing is, do you continue to have the trip after you've thrown up?
What was the question?
Okay, yeah. If your body wants to get rid of it, why not get rid of it? Well, I try not to throw up for the first 2 hours because I want to get the dose going, and that's not hard for me to do. I'm a Polak from Detroit, and my stomach just says whatever it is, it's food. You know. People get sick at a restaurant. My stomach just says, "Oh, more food, bacteria, more food," and but. If you throw up at 7 hours, you're long into it. It doesn't make any difference. So it kind of, I think if you throw up right away, yeah, you wouldn't get the dose going. And so at that point in the trip, I'm usually just kind of careful. I don't move too quickly. Don't jerk the stomach around and move slowly. And it passes for me. But some people are much more sensitive, so I can't speak in general. But it's certainly manageable for me. And
anything notable about the next day or like hangover period?
With any psychedelic, the next day I usually feel a little worn out. Like, not, I'll take a nap during the day. I'll do these things on Saturday, and Sunday is kind of just hanging out with it and, have a couple of beers and just relax. But yeah, the seeds will definitely. You'll probably definitely notice them the next day, more than LSD. Yeah.
You have like a ritual. You're talking about, kind of creating a Western shamanism. Do you have kind of a sacred ritual that you go through? Do you meditate? Do you have music and sense?
I say a prayer before I start. I say something like, Holy Spirit, Earth Mother, take my hand, show me what I need to see, and help me be humble. That's about it. I go from there.
And no music?
No, I don't listen to music. The only time I listen to music is if I'm doing like MDMA and LSD. I will put on some Enya. That's more fun. I've discovered that if you take MDMA and about 40 minutes into it, you drop a couple of hits of acid, it works really well because you kind of let the MDMA trip get established, and it doesn't really turn into LSD. I call it buffered LSD because MDMA is known to kind of suppress the amygdala and the fight and flight stuff. And if you get the MDMA rolling and then throw the acid in, it doesn't really turn into the confrontative aspect of acid. But it deepens the MDMA. It still feels like MDMA. And that's fun. I mean, I do that one for fun.
Are you doing like a big dose of MDMA or a smaller dose since you're at
125. And then I'll throw in like 300 micrograms of acid. And that's buffered. Yeah, the MDMA buffers the LSD. It's just, it works pretty well that way. A friend of mine called me up, and I was on the tail end of one of those. Sometimes I throw a tiny amount of methamphetamine in the beginning to kind of prime the MDMA. So
microdoses of amphetamines are neuroprotective.
So anyway, she calls me up and says, "You're feeling good," and I said, well, if you've taken 20 milligrams of methamphetamine, 125 milligrams of MDMA, and 300 micrograms of LSD, and you're not feeling good, you need to see a doctor. And anyway.
Have you, because microdosing is so popular now, have you heard of anyone microdosing with the seeds?
You can. I mean, I did it a lot for heading off migraine. I would chew up about a dozen seeds, and it seemed to just shift things enough to where I didn't launch into migraine. So, and LSD.
No, microdosing, the seeds.
Oh, the seeds.
Yeah.
They're easy to microdose.
Right.
You can chew up 10 seeds, And did you have the question? Did I get? Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted you to repeat your usage, whether it's daily or only during journeys of lion's mane, and how much.
I take one 500 milligram lion's mane a day, normally, and I'll take 4 of them on a journey.
Is lion's mane that edible one that's all like white and hairy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like the teeth are hanging down from it when it's growing off or something.
What does it do? Like,
It increases nerve growth factor, which is the like chemical signaler responsible for causing neuronal growth. So more neurons means neurogenesis.
Yeah, remyelinizing nerves. That's what Paul Stamets says. And my experience is there's some kind of substrate going on during a trip that it isn't making you trip more, but there's just this kind of like gentle thing massaging your nervous system that's going on via the lion's mane. I really felt it strongly with the seeds. I did a seed trip and threw in a bunch of lion's mane, and you could really feel it.
it's not like an MAOI thing or?
No.
No.
Should I say something about that?
Yeah, by all means.
Are you using Paul Stanley's products? Can I ask that?
No, this is just Swanson Health products.
Yeah, that's the standardized exercise I was talking about.
So it's a product you just buy somewhere?
Yeah, on Amazon. It's like $8 a bottle.
Yeah, Swanson vitamins, they're good for like the generic stuff that you would get at like a GNC or whatever. You don't need like a specific, high-powered brand version of something. Even if it is the high-powered brand version, they usually have it on there cheaper than Amazon. So I order like my fish oil, for example.
Okay.
Fish oil is another good one. It does the same kind of thing. Like, I'm not sure about the remyelinization of the immune system. Like, I think Stamets kind of oversells.
Yeah.
But it does have the NGF increase and nerve growth factor and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which increase dendritic growth, are two like systemic chemicals. Like, they're involved with your circadian rhythm. They're involved with your ability to be hungry, like it's involved with those hormones and stuff, but also, like I said, allowing for neurogenesis. You have to have enough of it. And in people who are traumatized or clinically depressed, they have suppressed levels, like generally around like 20% of what a normal person would have. And so anything that can increase NGF and BDNF will help with the neurogenesis process, which is part of what, when you're using therapeutic psychedelics, that's part of what you're trying to enhance. When anything that helps with the neurogenesis will help with the psychedelic. So, yeah.
Where do you get these bottles from Swanson?
Swanson vitamins, if you just
Online. Yeah, online.
Like swansons.com or something?
I think it's Swanson vitamins
Yeah.
or something, but yeah.
And it's not expensive. 60 capsules is like $8 or something.
Yeah, like I said, their store brand stuff, I take it all the time for a bunch of different things. Like there's specific herbs I can order on there that otherwise you'd have to go to like the vitamin shop in town and pay like 10 times as much. So the other two that I want to mention, just in relation to the lion's mane as like things that could help daily and also would help with the trip itself, are black seed, which is Nigella sativa. It's something that is used quite extensively in the Middle East. In fact, it's like one of the only herbal medicines used throughout like Arabic-speaking countries. It's like everything from like common cold to like herpes. They'll use high doses of the oil, but it has enzyme inhibition, so it enhances things similarly to turmeric, but in a more specific way. And it also, like I said, it is very effective as like a system-wide like health thing. So you can take it daily, and it's quite cheap. Like you can get the seed at like the bulk section of the co-op, and it's just listed under black seed, Nigella sativa. Sometimes people call it black cumin. You can use it as a spice too. But that one and sorry, there's one more. Intellect tree seed, which is one that I haven't been able to find.
Please? What?
Intellect tree seed.
Intellect?
Solastris paniculatus. Let me see.
No, there's nothing right with it.
But it's literally referred to as an intellect tree seed. It's used in Ayurvedic medicine quite extensively.
Intellect tree?
Yes.
Intellect tree. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Solastris paniculatus. So Clastrus paniculatus. P-A-N, panic, ulatus. But and that one is like for mental issues. It's used quite extensively in Ayurvedic medicine. It's protective for the memory. It acts on the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, so if you're a person who tends to smoke tobacco when you're cooking or something, it can actually fill in that role and like help with memory and attention there. It also is neuroprotective, so and it can help with the process. But anyway, if anybody had questions about those two, then They're just as like adjuncts in a similar range to the lion's mane. They will help in various ways, smooth out the edges, reduce your insufficiencies a little bit. I said omega-3 fish oils, high dose omega-3s like the high in DHA, EPA. That is anti-inflammatory as well. So if you have neuropathic issues, that can help as well to reduce flare-ups when you're taking something stimulating. So, but.
And you both mentioned methamphetamine, 20, was it 20 micrograms? Were you saying it was
Milligrams.
What?
She threw out the 20 milligrams, that's like a standard pill dose. What I was referring to, actually, you can see it in the literature too, if you look up the research papers, is that low doses, so like anywhere from like microgram levels to like quarter, maybe a third of what would be a normal dose. So at most 5 to 7 milligrams, basically. Unless your tolerance to it, then it would be higher. But like for normal people, less than 5 milligrams, like a quarter of what would be that 20 milligram pill. And that is stimulating, but at the low threshold of effects, it doesn't cause the overstimulation effects, and it actually is neuroprotective for other chemical damage. And so they don't really do much with that outside of like, some off-label treatment centers for Alzheimer's and such. They'll use small amounts, but typically they go for like legality or some other MAOI as well, so they don't use the amphetamines. But you can use the amphetamines for the neuroprotection. Legality is actually one of the most effective neuroprotective drugs we've ever made, and it's based off of amphetamine research. There's one of the researchers back in the day. So.
Would cocaine serve the same purpose?
No, not the same. Amphetamines specifically is for this. Cocaine has a different set of cascade effects. It has a dopamine reuptake inhibition really strongly, even at low doses, which is why you get such a strong craving for it.
Yeah.
So that kind of negates that.
Yeah, in the back.
Something that might be worth looking into as well would be endogenous ketones. Their ability to reduce beta amyloid plaques off the synaptic nerves and everything. They're really neuroprotective.
I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Exogenous ketones?
Okay.
Ketones.
Yeah, ketones. So,
like fat energy.
Right, yeah. Our bodies have the ability to produce ketones from lipids. So they found a way to bind beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone, to sodium. And this ketone ester, basically, well, it's not an ester, it's a salt. They allow it's a gene that regulates insulin sensitivity and glucose storage and regulates beta amyloid plaques, which is, so Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. It's the body's inability to use glucose in the brain. And that's because this gene spends so much time regulating glucose, it doesn't have the time to clear beta amyloid plaques off. And beta amyloid plaques, we gather them when we sleep, right?
Yes, cellular trash.
Right, yeah, to a degree, yes. And then, so ketones allow the body to sort of clear these out, right? So we can sort of think a little bit more clearly.
Yeah. That's the.
You can order them on the internet.
Yeah, it's like the clear-headed effect.
Yeah, it's
if you search for exogenous ketones, you'll find it. There's various forms of different potency. It all tastes terrible, so don't. But that's what. Like ketosis and fasting, like the mind state shifts that people talk about, are because they're using ketones. Then after you process through all of the what's it called, the excess glucose that the glycogen stores in the liver after like between 12 and 36 hours, depending how much you have stored up. Then your body stops using glucose and starts using ketones instead, and it's much more efficient. And then they can do the more cleanup stuff. So that's where you get the more clear-headed effect. Like people, they're like, I'm on day 3 of the fast, and I feel so clear-headed. And it's like, well, that's a combination of, running out your glycogen stores, and depending on the fast, you're eating your organs. But
yeah, Sandra.
Could some of you people post on our meetup? We can make comments on our meetup page, like for this one. We could go to the page and perhaps put some notes or some links.
Or on the Facebook group.
Is the video going to get put on the YouTube? Or?
Yeah, the YouTube channel and Facebook probably. But if you guys aren't on our Facebook group, it's somewhat active and discussion happens there.
Yeah, so if people could add the spelling of these things that they're talking
Yeah, I'll
about,
check.
and then
I'll post
the
a couple
links
things.
that you request would really be really helpful.
If anyone has questions outside the group, I'm open as well. Sage. You can find me on the group as well, like through the meetup, not Facebook.
Okay, is that everything? Yeah.
Sounds like we're getting there.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.